For over 20 years, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey has been helping hockey players of all ages develop their individual skills and improve on all aspects of their game. Through structured drills and innovative training equipment, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey's intense on-ice instruction challenges each student to be the best at their ability. Find a hockey clinic or summer camp that is right for you today at nateshockey.com. That's N-A-T-E-S hockey.com. Eric Nate's Euro Hockey, train to be the best.
And welcome into the New England Hockey Journal's RinkWise podcast. I'm your host, Evan Marinofsky, joined today by Patrick Donnelly. Pat, what's going on?
Not much. Off the long weekend, not much to complain about.
You skied a ton, right? You were hitting the slopes.
I did. I went to Sunapee for the day on Sunday, just, by myself, had a free morning, figured might as well just go up for a half day before the Pats. It was a zoo. Oh my God, it was crazy.
I can imagine.
I was not expecting that, although I should have expected it on the second to last day of a holiday weekend. And went up with some buddies yesterday on Martin Luther King and kind of was fearing for the worst, but maybe it was the snow, maybe it was getaway day on the long weekend or whatever, but half the crowd was awesome. Great snow. Good time.
Hell yeah. Yeah, skiing alone that's a good skill. Like, that's just so confident in yourself. You know the mountain so well. It's like, I'm going up by myself. It's going to be kind of bliss. It's very peaceful.
Yeah. It's great when, like, it's a place I go to all the time. Like, a couple of places I went to last year, like, just, I have my pass. It's like, well, this is only an hour and a half. Like, I can, kind of do this on the way or catch something on the way back. Like, might as well make a trip out of it or whatever. And when you go to a new place, it's kind of weird because you don't know where you're going. And you don't, like, have anyone to troubleshoot with, like, what do you think about this? Or going this way.
We're hitting the Black Diamond today, baby.
Yeah, right. No, it's fun. It's like, it's kind of like going golfing by yourself or going to the driving range by yourself, man. Like, hey, I have 6 hours to kill. If, like, hour and a half away, might as well.
Yeah, I've never golfed by myself, but a driving range by yourself is awesome. Just like, you know what? I'm here. I can take as long as I want. I can do what I want. That is awesome. Yeah, no, I had a pretty relaxing weekend too. I didn't ski or anything, but just chilled, which was nice. But back at it today. Let's start with boys prep, Pat. Let's start with boys prep.
Your rankings came out Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. One big team to note, Canterbury continues their upward climb. They're into the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, this is funny. Like, I wrote about it this week. They weren't even in my next 15 to begin the year. They lost their goalie. They lost their 2 leading scorers. And you kind of think, like, it's going to be kind of a rebuilding, reset year for Canterbury. They're going to be kind of somewhere in the middle. Maybe they fight for a small school, the 8 seed or something. Hasn't been the case so far. It's funny. They were really good to open the year. Then they lost to St. Mark's 8-2. So I kind of went, they'll be a nice small school team. Currently 5th in the JSPR as of time of recording. Now they went into my top 5 in the rankings, mainly because a lot of the teams in the middle and the bottom of the top, top 10 lost. So it wasn't like Canterbury beat these, they beat teams in the top 5 or anything, but they've still won 4 in a row. Williston, Lawrence, who they lost to with the Watkins, but then beat them 7-1 2 weeks ago. And then they beat Choate and Frederick Gunn over the last week. Their other big wins, Hotchkiss, who's in my top 10, Berkshire, who's been around it, Cushing, who was in it for a little while. And then they have Seamus McMakin leading the way up front. Tommy Brown has been awesome on defense for them. He's 2nd in the region in points. Cody Hugh has been great in net, one of the best netminders in the region. I think the big question for me, Pat, going forward with them is, can they keep this up? Can this continue? And Canterbury in my time in this job has always, they won the small school a couple of years ago. It had a great run to it, but it's like, can they be that Elite 8 team? That's a big, we saw St. Mark's last year go from being a small school regular to an Elite 8 team, and they should be an Elite 8 team again this year. Can Canterbury do something similar? And in terms of games coming up, they have Westminster, they have Taft, they have Millbrook, Pomfret and Winchendon, and Berkshire again, Trinity Pauling. They have Cushing on February 14th, Frederick Gunn, Williston, and then they finish with Kent and Avon on February 21st and 25th. So they have a big slate coming up. And if you can survive that and still be in it, they'll be battle tested. I think they're really good. I think they're really old. I think they have 12 seniors. You counted this last time, 12 seniors, 2 post grads. That always helps. So they should stay in it, and the JSPR certainly thinks that they will. Comes down to proving it. So far they've been so far they've been better than advertised. It's just about continuing that, which will be kind of their big thing.
Yeah, it's one thing to be fifth in the JSPR on January 20th. It's another thing to be fifth in the JSPR on February 28th. So
Yes.
like you said, those games to keep an eye on will be big. As far as the JSPR goes, and we're gonna keep talking about JSPR a lot for another month. Get used to the acronym, folks. You got Tabor on the outside looking in, Canterbury, Holderness there. Can they make a push? Or not even on the outside looking in, actually. They're on the back end of the JSPR projected Elite Eight. Can they hold on?
Yeah, I mean, as of Tuesday, January 20th, the JSPR is Salisbury, Avon, St. Mark's, Tabor, Canterbury, Holderness, Dexter, Thayer. Your teams like Salisbury, Avon, St. Mark's, Dexter are the regulars. Can Tabor, can Canterbury, can Holderness, can Thayer hold on? That's the big question. And we talked a little bit about it with Canterbury. Tabor, I put in the same boat as Canterbury. They're an older team. We talked about them a lot last week. They've had some success. Thayer's, I said it, Pat. We talk about how we're wrong all the time on certain things, but we'll also talk about when we're right. I've had Thayer as a sleeper team all year, who should be rolling. And they've been up and down at parts this year, but they've been better of late. Can they hang with the ISL Keller teams? Can they, reliably beat your Bell Hills, your Governors, your Miltons? That's going to be Thayer's big thing. Holderness's big test is Kimball Union when they play them twice in February. That's what it is every year for Holderness. Can they take one of those games with KUA? KUA did lose to Tilton this past weekend. They're outside looking in terms of the top 8 teams in JSPR. So that's what it's going to be for those teams. And I think you look right outside of it. You have Hotchkiss at 9, Kimball Union at 10, Sebs at 11, Loomis at 12. Cushing and Brunswick are not in the top 16 for JSPR. So you have to imagine those teams make a push at some point. Maybe they don't. Belmont Hill at 13, Govs at 14, Kent at 15. Those teams could easily make a push back into the top 8 in the JSPR. So I expect it's going to be close. I don't think the 8 teams right now in the JSPR are going to be the teams that are there at the end. I don't think we're going to, it's mid-January right now. Like, it's going to change. It just comes down to, is it Hotchkiss or a KUA or a Sebs, they're young, or a Bell Hill or a Govs that moves in. Those are sort of the big things I'm watching. The other thing I will say, Dexter at 7, that's kind of wild. Now, I know it's an algorithm, so I shouldn't be arguing with numbers, but I have to imagine Dexter is higher than the 7th seed come the tournament. Because boy, oh boy, if they're the 7th seed in the Elite 8, Pat, like, I don't want to face them as a 7th seed if I'm a 2 seed. So I think that's going to be the interesting thing to watch down the stretch here with the JSPR.
Yeah, those are always the interesting ones to watch where, you get a team like Dexter at 7, like you said, it's watch out. But, outside of the JSPR, outside of the math, can't argue with numbers. It's like talking to a wall.
He's right. Can't, nope.
Outside of Canterbury, all that. One of the big ones from last week, NHL Central Scouting midterms rankings came out. A lot of locals named. What did you make of these rankings?
Yeah, so you had 3 in the so NHL Central Scouting. If people didn't see it, they ranked players of North American skaters and European skaters and international, excuse me. And obviously, the people we care about were North American skaters. 3 players from Prep were ranked in round 4: Miles Brosnan, Brian McFadden, Will Manchuso. Caden Danya, Groton defenseman, was in round 5. He was number 133 ranked North American skater. 2 in round 7, Charlie Puglisi and Alex Theodore, Winchendon and Andover, respectively. And then for goalies, they just rank them. And Elliot Lennon, 28, Deerfield goalie. Nealon Johnson, number 36 for Hotchkiss. I would love to sit here, Pat, and say, I can't believe they ranked so-and-so here. None of that. I actually think they got this one right.
I love the goalie rankings. Sorry to cut you off, but it's like magic beans. Who cares? Just throw them in there.
Throw them in there. They're hilarious. And like, I'd have to go back and look, but like when Rudy Guimond was picked by Detroit out of Taft a couple of years ago, I don't remember him being a highly ranked Central Scouting goalie. So just because Johnson and Lennon are relatively lower ranked goalies doesn't mean that, all it takes is one team to sit there and say, hey, we really like Elliot Lennon. We really like Nealon Johnson. We're going to take him in the 6th or 7th round. But in terms of the people that I think have the best shot at getting drafted, it's the top five. It's the four who are ranked highest: Brosnan, McFadden, Mancuso, and Danya. One thing that I wrote about last week, Pat, is there's not been a prep player picked before the 5th round since 2022. So it's been a while. And Brosnan, McFadden, Mancuso all ranked ahead of the 5th round. By the way, does not mean they'll be picked there. Like, we've had players ranked higher that have not gotten drafted. So this is not a guarantee. This is just what Central Scouting thinks. Mancuso to me is a tough one. I think he gets picked. I don't think it's before round 5. 6 foot left winger, really, speedy, productive. I don't think that's someone that you're reaching up into the 4th or 3rd round for. And that's no disrespect. 5th, 6th, 7th round's awesome. I'm just talking about like pick before the 5th round. Brosnan's another interesting one with this offensive defenseman. I feel like he's quietly at 31 points in 16 games so far. I don't know if quietly is the right way to put it, but he's been having a fantastic year production-wise. He's been racking up a ton of assists, producing a ton of offense for Dexter. I haven't seen Dexter since like the 2nd week of the season, so I actually have to get back out and see them again. But just going off stats, Brosnan's 4th in the region in scoring. He's tied actually with Mancuso for that. So to me, like, Brosnan's biggest thing that scouts were telling me about entering the year was like, can you produce? Can you dominate? And he's done that. He's been doing that. So I have to imagine he's someone that is in consideration for being picked above the 5th round. And the other thing about Brosnan, by the way, he just did this again. He was at that All-American Prospects game on, was it Thursday night? Flies home Friday morning, plays Winchendon, and then plays New Hampton on Saturday. So hopefully he slept in on Sunday, because Lord knows he needs it. And he did the thing earlier this winter where he did the NTDP and Dexter like in the same weekend, going back and forth, which was incredible. So Brosnan's one. Man, the other two that I would highlight are McFadden and Danya. 6'5" right shot defenders, Pat. We talk about this all the time. NHL scouts love them some big right shot defensemen. And I think the biggest thing with these two is they're not producing at a high rate, but that's not what people are looking for. Like, what scouts are looking for is, are there skills they have that are projectable to the next level, that aren't just they're really big. Like, Danya's a very good skater. So like, there are going to be teams who say, hey, you know what? The skating is there. The size is there. Let's take a chance on him. Now, do they reach above the 5th round? I'm not sure. Wouldn't shock me. And with McFadden, it's like, hey, here's a kid who's big and has tremendous stick skills, really good with the puck, very offensive. Do we take him? Do we reach for him? And that's why, to me, like, I put those three, Brosnan, McFadden, and Danya, on like potentially picked before the 5th round watch. So I have no issue with those rankings. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out the rest of the way. Do any of them do anything that sets them apart going forward? I'm not going to spoil anything, Pat, because a lot of the next magazine is based around NHL draft prospects playing their draft year in prep. So we'll probably discuss that when that magazine comes out and the story comes out. But in terms of Central Scouting, I think it's actually been a relatively good year for prep. More kids than last year. And for Puglisi and Theodore, personally, I don't think they're there in terms of being draft picks. That's nothing personal. Just means right now, I don't think, I haven't heard enough from scouts about those players. And look, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I want the most amount of kids picked out of prep. I want the most kids picked. But to me, it's the players to watch are Brosnan, McFadden, Danya, and Mancuso. No question. Those four.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's the big four. That it's been that way for pretty much all year.
And the other thing, Pat, is the funny thing about those four players is I'll hear from scouts like, I wouldn't pick this one, but I'd pick that one. And then I hear it from another scout, well, I'd pick that one, but I wouldn't pick this one. And it's just debatable. And I have people who say, this player is not going to get drafted. And then I talk to someone else and they're like, are they kidding? Of course they're going to get drafted. I think that's the biggest thing is after round 3, it is a toss-up. It is a complete and utter coin flip. And so that's what makes it exciting, makes it stressful for them. All those players can do is do their absolute best the rest of the way to put themselves in the best position. And the other thing I hear from a lot of kids is like, the draft isn't my main focus. But you know what? It is the main focus the day of the draft. So Yeah, that's where Central Scouting is right now. We'll kind of keep tabs on it throughout the year. We, won't hammer it, but I think we'll talk about it in the next coming weeks when the magazine comes out. And so that's boys prep. That is boys prep. Pat, let's dive into girls prep. Let's dive into some girls prep. 1v2 played this week, Pat. What happened?
Yeah, number 1, Williston. Number 2, Loomis Chafee. Loomis didn't have Lindsay Stepnowski. She was scoring goals in the gold medal game.
How about that? I read 56-1, like the outscored opponents. Holy
yeah,
God.
we'll get to that in a minute. And that wasn't the same day, obviously, but 1 versus 2 on Friday. Williston wins 2-1. Nita Coffey and Brooke Schluter with the goals. River Grady played really well with 19 saves. Williston just continues to roll. We say the same thing every week. They've been number 1 for a couple weeks now. 11-1-0. No signs of slowing down. They're number 1 in the JSPR. Top 3 matchup again this week against Dexter. And then, you get Kent on Saturday. Kent's no pushover. This is the Loomis win came after a 9-0 win over Berkshire. 3-point games across the board for Mia Daly, Brooke Schluter, Katie Putt, Brenna Zitter. Young player Ashley Anderson scored twice. The thing about Williston that's most impressive right now is you see Andover, where Andover's a great team. Andover's a really deep team too, but you have Sarah Powers and Caroline Averill each putting up over 2 points per game. You have Annie Schwartz at Loomis putting up 2 points per game. You have all these teams where you have a couple players absolutely lighting the world on fire. And at Williston, they're, leading scorer is Mia Daly with 16 points. You follow up with Schluter at 16 points, Zola Pikarski at 13 points, Ava Carr 12 points, Nina Coffey 10 points. It's a lot of balance, and they're not, they beat Berkshire 9-0, but it's not it's one person had a 6-point game, and you've got one line contributing. Everyone's chipping in, and that's the most impressive thing for Williston right now.
And you mentioned Andover. Big milestone this week for Andover.
Yeah, talk about Caroline Averill and Sarah Powers. Last week, Sarah Powers reached the 100-point mark. This past week, Caroline Averill reaches the 100-point mark as well. And just the second half these two are having, where they were both great in December, but it's just a completely different level in January. I think we talked about a little bit last week, where it's just Caroline Averill has 26 points in 12 games. Sarah Powers has 28 points in 12 games. They are 1 and 2 leading prep and scoring. And, I talked about it after the Governor's game 2 weeks ago. Nobody else touches the puck when they're on the ice. It's people talked about those Chara Bergeron Bruins, and when those two are on the ice, the other team never touched the puck. It's the same way here. Just can't say enough about the run they've been on these last 2 weeks as Andover just really hits its stride.
Dexter's an interesting team. They're the only undefeated team left in prep, but I think you have to wonder, is that going to end at some point? How good is Dexter in your eyes?
Well, Dexter's, I'm not asking how good is Dexter in to be blunt, fraud watch. I don't think it's that
like how we were with Cushing last year.
Yeah, I guess it's more to the point of all right, are they number 3, or are they just in this batch of top 5s, or can they be Williston this week, and can they take over that top spot? Because they're not similar to Williston. They're not setting the world on fire with their production. Their 3 leading scorers are Maggie Lovering at 14 points in 12 games. Evelyn Doyle has 13 and 12. Sawyer Merrill has 12 and 12, and Leah Hafer and Devin Moore are having great seasons. And you get on down, and it's a lot of balance. Nobody is really on fire, but Dexter's just getting it done. You beat St. Paul's 3-1. You shut out Governors 3-0. Governors isn't ranked, and we're kind of will they, won't they, as far as making an Elite 8 case. But that's still a good team. That's still a skilled team. And St. Paul's really had Dexter. I was at that game on Wednesday. St. Paul's had Dexter on their heels for the first 10 minutes of that game, and it was just hemmed in. St. Paul scores first, and then Sawyer Merrill scores after a nice drive to net from Leah Hafer, and all of a sudden Dexter flips the switch. And it's kind of just the level that every single forward line seemed to execute at was so impressive. Just to a T on the forecheck. Maggie Chudzinski, we've talked about her a lot. People probably roll their eyes at how much we write about the Chudzinski family, But I mean, I personally think the hype is legit with Maggie. Just a beast. She plays a ton of minutes, impacts the play, and like it's just, she's not going to blow you away with her skating, but she's just so freaking poised with the puck, and no one can take it from her in transition. Just an absolute, just beast finding skating lanes out of the zone. And then you get your young players like a Chloe Rabazi looking the part on D. Even Tegan Beigel, who I've seen play forward a bunch with the Boston Junior Eagles, she's playing defense for Dexter right now, and she didn't look out of place at all. And you got two good goalies. So it's the question of how good is Dexter is, are you number 3, or can you take down Williston this week? Can you take it to them? And, Thayer, you got Thayer on Friday as well after Williston on Wednesday. Like, those are 2 really tough games this week. And if you take care of business in both, or, at least it's a tough quality, quote unquote quality loss with Williston, that's still going to go a long way for Dexter.
Have the Chodzinski checks been clearing for you? They haven't been clearing for me. I don't know. They're not coming through or something.
I'm actually still waiting for him in the mail.
They keep bouncing for me. I don't know what's going on with that. I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, no, the Chodzinski family gets a lot of press, and rightfully so, from us.
Do you want to skate fast? For 50 years, Laura Stam instructors have taught youth players to pros how to skate correctly, powerfully, and fast. Players who attend Laura Stam power skating programs learn how to skate fast by learning how to execute every maneuver in hockey. They become powerful, stable, efficient, and explosively fast skaters. If you can't wait for a clinic, join our subscription skills video service, and we'll show you the skills taught at our clinics in an easy-to-use video format with training plans to guide your training. Register or subscribe now at laurastam.com. That's LauraStamm.com. You can learn to skate fast.
Deerfield, statement over Exeter this week. What did you think of that one?
Yeah, Deerfield, they beat Exeter 5-1. Exeter was ranked 9th for us at the time. That came after a 10-0 win for Deerfield over Northfield Mount Herman. Just kind of big week all around for their big guns. Ava Giroux had a pair against Exeter. She scored against NMH. Sophie Frost had 2 goals and an assist against NMH, along with Alessandra Picard. Picard scored another against Exeter. Picard specifically as a young player has really, come on strong here. She had a good start, and then she's kind of really nice start to January. Deerfield's won 6 straight. They're 7th in the JSPR. And they got 3 games this week that are all kind of real, testy a little bit. Choate on Wednesday, New Hampton on Friday, Taft on Saturday. Choate and Taft are still hanging around in the JSPR in that kind of next level, outside the Elite 8. But, Choate, like kind of like I always said before, where it's the record doesn't stand out, but, they're giving teams good games, and, all it takes is, timely goal here, timely go there, and all of a sudden a team like Deerfield takes a tough loss and maybe tumbles a little bit. But yeah, it was Deerfield had, I think, over the course of this streak, it was a lot at the Dexter tournament. It was Nichols, Hill School, Lawrenceville, NMH. So Hill School's quality team, really a lot of skill up there. But then you roll into a tough game in a top 10 matchup with Exeter, and you take care of business. And we'll touch on Exeter here quickly. How available were their top guns? Paisley Meyer and Aaron Sears missed a win over Worcester Academy last week. They were sick. Is that any factor in the Deerfield game? But the result is what it is. I will say for Exeter, you had Dominique Gray here step up, Mia Griffith, Lainey Fortney. That's the big thing with Exeter. We know what their top line can do. Paisley Meyer over a goal per game, all this and that. Can the depth players step up? Last week they did. It didn't really come much more to fruition against Deerfield, but paid through in the win over Worcester Academies. But it's still nice to see the production come through there for that question mark with Exeter.
And it's a similar thing with Groton too, right? About the depth scores.
Yeah, I mean, so we know how much Groton relies on Tina Scalise, and they haven't had her the last few weeks just with her at the U18 Women's Worlds. But Zoe Smith has had a really nice stretch of late. She has like 4 goals in her last 4 games. Paid off for them this week in a win over Milton Academy. And, Milton's struggling, but it's still, to get 4 different goal scorers in a 5-0 win. Ava Barber was a young player. They were really excited about coming into the year, and she's, been producing nicely in her first prep season. So, you get Scalise back into the lineup, can these other players continue to shine through for you? That'll be the thing I'm looking at for Groton in particular. I'm hoping, Groton's in that crowd of like BVN and, maybe Taft or Choate, depending on, travel, that I would love to get my eyes on again down the stretch.
A game you did get your eyes on, Brooks and Lawrence last week. What did you think of Brooks's win there?
Yeah. Hey, Brooks and Lawrence, two teams we're not really talking about in the JSPR, but, good to get out and see teams you might not usually see if the opportunity arises. So that was a physical game. I think it was really physical. And, maybe it was because, you had the Brooks and Milton Academy boys players kind of watching the game before their game following. And you get all the reactions from every time there's some sort of contact, and maybe that inflated it. But that was a physical game. Both teams play hard. Props to both coaches, Nikki Petrich and Mike Burns. But Brooks, there are a lot of interesting young players to keep an eye on in that game, especially for Brooks. Cassie Ling is someone I think I talked about her a little bit, I should say, coming out of the Dexter Southfield tournament. I saw Brooks a little bit there, but just her smarts and her 200-foot game, she impacts a lot of things for Brooks. She quarterbacks the top power play. She's out there in the penalty kill, centering the top line, playing a lot of minutes in her first prep year. And, she gets rewarded with the go-ahead goal there. And then just kind of, the young players and the mix kind of experienced leaders that Brooks has, with an Angela Fabo, and then you bring in a Cassie Ling, Shelby Buckler, Natasha Godfrey. Isabel Previtt was really good on Saturday. So just interest. Brooks is someone I would, they're under 500 right now. Do you backdoor your way into a small school seed? Probably not. But, as far as next year and going forward with these young players they've brought in, I've got my eye on them.
Speaking of teams you have your eye on, JSPR. What do you make of the JSPR and the way it looks right now?
Yeah. Hey, as we sit here on January 20th, right now it's Williston, Dexter, Andover, Nobles, Loomis Chaffee, Tabor, Deerfield, and Exeter. I still pretty firm, and I think that top five, it's just going to rotate. I don't think that's just going to change. I don't think that's going to change much. Tabor, Deerfield, Exeter, and then you get to the outside looking in, St. Paul's and Groton. I think that's kind of your race for those back three seeds there. And then you get into Choate, Governors, Rivers. BB&N is into the top 16 now. They're 6-4, and they're a team. I haven't seen them since the Harrington, but I was really impressed. All the young players they have, new coach, and a lot of the turnover from last year, how they still play to their identity. They play super hard. They make life really difficult on the, under Ed Bourget for all those years, they made life really difficult on the forecheck. They were physical in the defensive zone, and they were opportunistic, and that's still the case. Then you got Taft and Cushing rounding things out. There, I believe, is 17th in the RPI, so they're just outside the top 16 of the JSPR. There's one, Maddie Call is, we talk about players lighting the world on fire. Maddie Call is 23 points all of a sudden, just really popping off over these last 2 weeks. And so, Thayer gets Tabor on Wednesday. I think that's a pretty big game for both teams. Can Tabor take care of business against the team it's ranked higher against, or can Thayer come, pull off an upset and kind of vault itself into this thing as far as, jockeying for position in that second half of the JSPR. And, we've talked about Choate and Govs. Rivers is kind of, after it was a tough kind of New Year's tournament for them. They've kind of fallen out of that, Elite Eight race. But hey, if you rip off 3-4 in a row, or all you need to do is if you pick up a win over one of those top 6 teams, and how long of a way that goes for you with the math, you don't ever want to say, you don't want to never say never.
Never say never. I agree with you on that. I teased this a little bit earlier, and you mentioned it a couple times when you were talking about players who are out. U18 Women's Worlds. Pat, I'll let you take it. How did the U.S. do? I must have missed this. How did they do?
Oh, they did okay. They did okay.
Did they potentially outscore their opponents by a lot of goals?
They did. If you might have heard, the U.S. won gold in Canada against Canada at the U18 Women's World Championship. 6-0-0. They never trailed once in the tournament. They never tied. They were never tied beyond the opening score of 0-0. Every game starts 0-0, of course. They were never tied beyond that. They never trailed at any point in the tournament. They outscored teams 56-1. 56-1 in 6 games. That's
Laughable.
damn near 10 goals a game. And, say what you want about who they're playing. They played Sweden in the semis. Was it Hungary in the quarterfinals? I'd have to double check. Group stage, they made light work of Slovakia and Finland and Czechia and, those countries for the most part, outside of, Anela Lupashinova, or, another star from, one of those countries. They don't really have the depth that the U.S. or Canada does, but you get to the gold medal game against Canada, and it's still a 2-0 shutout. Bianca Biratiri was awesome. She had 37 saves. Player of the game honors. Tyler Hansen had 2 assists. Emily Pohl scored. Lindsay Stepnowski, Loomis Chafee star, scored as well. Big insurance goal there. And, the U.S. kind of owns this tournament. They've medaled in all 18 editions. They've reached the gold medal game 17 times. They've won it 10 times. They've gold in 2 of the last 3 years. I'm sure if you wanted to go back more years, you could say gold in X of the last X years, and it would hold up. But hey, hell of a job by Courtney Kennedy and her staff. And the locals were fantastic. Jane Daly was MVP, tournament record 12 goals, led everyone in goals with 12, points with 17. She's a Shattuck St. Mary's standout, but someone we know from Mass Hockey Festival and Final 40 as a Medfield native. Ohio State commit as of the last few weeks. So congratulations to her, and absolutely someone who fits what Ohio State does with just that really, high flying, electric, dominant skill set. So props to her. And Maggie Averill, we've talked a lot about the Averils as well. Captain the team, defender of the tournament, 6 goals and 14 points, led all blue liners in that category. She was on the All-Star team with Daly. And then you go down the list of the locals, it was Averill's 3rd medal. She won gold in 24, silver last year. Annabelle Lovell, China Taylor, and Tina Scalise were on the silver squad last year as well. Lovell had 5 points. Lovell and Scalise had 5 points in the tournament. China Taylor, not a New England native, but plays around here. 11 assists in 6 games. And then, Stepnowski had, I think, 9 points in 6 games, 6 goals in 6 games. That's pretty good. And then you got, Nobles was well represented too, with Catherine McCool, Lily Bromley, and Ava DeCourcy all getting on the score sheet as well. So, a lot of years you say, is it Minnesota or New York kind of leading the charge here? No, it was, and not that it's a contest, but, and obviously those players from other places in the country obviously showed out well as well to get, just obviously get it done in dominant fashion. But a great week for the locals. Nice to see between the 9 skaters with the local ties.
What the hell even is a kilometer, Pat? That's right. Plant the flag. Plant the American flag there. I like that. I have not seen a long-term drubbing like that in a long time. That was a thorough beatdown by the U.S. So good for them and good for the locals. That is not just planting the flag for America, but planting the New England flag on that too, which is even better.
If you want to go down the scores here, so you get a exhibition pre-tournament game against Czechia, 4-2 win. Slovakia preliminary round, 13-0. Czechia, 9-1. Finland, 14-0. Hungary in the quarterfinals, 9-0. Sweden in the semifinals, 9-1. And then 2-0 against Canada in the gold medal game.
Wait, I thought so they gave up 2 goals against them.
You're right.
Damn.
I got a bad number.
Ooh.
Got a bad number.
You know what? We didn't major in math, but that doesn't take away from being 56-2. 56-2 over all those games. That is pretty thorough. We'll switch over to MIAA. I want to give myself a pat on the back, Pack. Oh boy. I want to give myself a pat on the back, Pat. I'd say pat twice in one sentence. We always talk about not disagreeing with numbers. I did disagree with the MIAA power rankings for a while. They had Xaverian as the number 1 team. I get it. It's an algorithm, whatever. I'm not going to argue with Jim Clark on that one. I'll trust Jim on this. But I kept saying, no, CM is the top team in the state. CM, Catholic Memorial, is the top team in the state. No disrespect to Xaverian. I just think CM has it more. They played on Sunday. CM won 5-0 over Xaverian. And I was not there, but according to the stories of the people who were, like Tom Mulhern was there from the Herald, CM dominated. Landon Carlson, Daniel Antonellis both scored twice. Jackson Fleming had a 20-save shutout. To me, CM is the number one team in the state. I think that's become clear. And we'll get to St. John Shrewsbury in a second. They lost to BC High. They lost at the Catholic Conference Showcase on Sunday. CM to me is unquestioned number one team in the state right now. Xaverian, SJS, St. John's Prep, those teams are right there, but CM is clearly that team. Now we're at the halfway point, so a lot can change. But if you had to ask me right now, like, yeah, they would be the favorite for the Division I title. They would be the favorite, and they'd repeat. Again, a lot can happen, but they have the net, they have the goaltending. James Baker continues to have a fantastic season on D. Up front, we've talked about it a number of times. They have a lot of skill. They have a lot of guys who can produce. They can score in different ways. CM, to me, is the number one team in the state, and they proved it beating Xaverian, who Xaverian's been outstanding so far this year. Like, I don't want to take away from them either. Like, for the midseason report we talked about last week, Xaverian's been one of the teams that's sort of been a surprise. I think I ranked them at 7 to open the year, and they're in that top 3 grouping. So, like, look, a bad day is a bad day. They still play again, by the way, in February, which I expect that to be a fantastic game. But to me, CM is the number one team in the state.
Yeah, and then you get into BC High, St. John Shrewsbury. St. John Shrewsbury, we've talked about them a lot, kind of creeping up here. What were the takeaways there?
Yeah, I mean, creeping up, they're up there. Like, that's the thing, but they lose to BC High. So they survive the gauntlet of St. John's Prep, Xaverian, CM. They go 3-0-0. And then you lose to BC High at the Catholic Conference Showcase. I think there's a couple things you can take away from that. I think number one, St. John Shrewsbury was due for a loss. But I'd also say, like, don't sleep on BC High. BC High is a team that's fallen out of my top 10 the last couple of weeks. Canton from Division II is in my top 10. Arlington Catholic, which we'll get to here in a second, they've forced their way into the top 10. But I don't think BC High should be slept on. Against St. John Shrewsbury, Max Ryan scores twice. Sean Keenan scores a goal. Nolan O'Sullivan, who's sort of their leader, he had 2 assists along with Tommy Misolo. And then in net, Dominic Conti had 25 saves. How about that? Conti Forum goalie for BC High. I know, Pat, if you're a BU guy, you don't care, but I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't think there's any connection to Conti Forum. If there is, someone let me know. I don't think there is, but still, I find that kind of cool. But I will give them this, like, BC High is a team that the last couple years has been sort of near the bottom of the Catholic Conference. And so they accumulate losses and you think, oh, well, what are they? Are they really that good? And then they have these kinds of games like against St. John Shrewsbury, or they play all the Catholic Conference teams close. And you say, oh, I don't want to play them in the tournament. That's still a battle-tested, really hard team to play against. So I think BC High absolutely proved it. I'm not worried about St. John Shrewsbury. The other thing, though, is for them, like, they have the other half of the gauntlet. Like, the Catholic Conference flips over, and then you got to play everybody again down the stretch here. So that's going to be a big test for them. To me, like, I think CM stays at the top of the state through all that. The big question is can St. John's Prep find its way back up top? Can they do better in the second half playing against Xaverian and BC High and CM and St. John Shrewsbury? And can St. John Shrewsbury keep its status? Those are the really important storylines that I have focused on the Catholic Conference in the second half.
As far as whether or not trying to judge who's for real and who's not, Arlington Catholic, they're 11th in the D1 power rankings. It's getting hard to ignore them.
It is. I mean, they're 10-2-0. They lost to Xaverian 7-1 on December 20th, and since then they've won 9 games in a row. This hurts me to say, came back from down 3-0 to beat Framingham 6-5, which, by the way, Pat, Framingham is in the power rankings. I think they were like 20th last week, they might be higher than 20th. They're in it. They're in and around it. And they've been better. But so, Arlington Catholic beats Framingham 6-5, and that's a big win. Freshman Kale Caruso and senior Alex Frost both had 3 assists. Sophomore Braden Bozanowski had 2 goals and an assist, so props to them for that. And then on Monday, they beat Barnstable 5-4 in OT, which is not nothing. So I have to imagine they rise in the power rankings this week for the MIAA. We'll see what it means for my rankings. I'd assume they go up a little, but Canton's right above them, and Canton's been rolling too. So I'm not exactly sure if Arlington Catholic's going to go to 8 or 9 or how I'm going to do it, but Arlington Catholic's proving they're legit. Very interested to see them down the stretch here at some point. And then just to round it out with Publix, because I know people are like, where are the Publix, Evan? Only public you mentioned is your own Framingham team losing. Reading and Arlington both get big wins over Woburn. Woburn is a very, very, very good team down. I believe they're in D2 now. Reading and Arlington. Reading takes them down 2-1. Arlington 2-0. So not much really changed with the Publix. Hingham also got a big win over St. Mary's Lynn. So that's legit for them. So for me, like nothing really changed with the Publix this week. I don't like last week. It was like, oh, Hingham leapfrogs Arlington. This week, based off what's happened this past week, the Publix are kind of where they're at right now. And I think, that'll change with the Ed Burns tournament coming up here. By the way, Pat, is there a chance? I haven't looked ahead to the Ed Burns schedule, but usually Ed Burns, the second day is the Super Bowl. So might get hairy around here, at least with that. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. And moving over to girls MIAA, Pat, Algonquin still up top in the D1 power rankings?
Still on top in the D1 power rankings. They're 12-0-0. They're, winners, obviously, of 12 straight. They beat Waltham. Waltham has some skill there. They beat Peabody, Linfield, North Reading. They beat Leominster. They beat Pope Francis. Westford's coming up, and, we talked about their upcoming stretch in, the coming weeks. I think we're going to learn more about them than maybe we have in these last 12 games. But, it's again, you can't ignore it. Madeline Glenn's been awesome this year. We talked about her last week as well. And you look at D2 with Westwood on top. Westwood's won 5 straight. They had, after the loss to Hingham, they've kind of just been firing on all cylinders. So it's, kind of status quo there at the top of both rankings. But I've got my eye on a handful of teams further down.
And there were some big matchups this week. NDA was number 2, and they took down Hingham, but then lose to Archie's. What'd you think of that one?
Yeah, NDA. We've talked about that line with Abby Grotman, Chase Harmon, Abby Burke, and Chase Harmon comes through against Hingham. Aaron Krall posts a shutout. We know obviously Aaron Krall is NDA is probably going to go as far as she takes them, which is the case of pretty much any MIAA team with your when you got the good goalie. But hey, Hingham to obviously with the turnover there, but to keep a team like that at bay in a 1-0 win says a lot about your goaltending, your defensive acumen. This was a big win there for NDA, but you also lose to Archie's, and Archie's is hanging around. Them and Bishop Feehan, we keep talking about them, like will they, won't they? And Feehan's won 3 straight by shutout. So they're hanging around, and you don't want to count them out just yet.
No, you absolutely don't. I mentioned Framingham losing. So Pat, we've got to talk about Malden Catholic losing. HPNA gets a big win over them.
Yeah, and hey, MC was leading. HPNA scores 3 unanswered in the third. McKenna Moore with the game winner with 24 seconds left. Mia Kamek had a goal and 2 assists. HPNA is another one that has just exceeded our expectations, and they're firmly, I think, a top 5 team, at least as of my last rankings. MC, it's kind of what to make of them this year. Their record isn't dazzling, but they're still 12th in the D1 power rankings. So, on track to get a potentially decent seed. You've lost to HPNA, Duxbury, St. Mary's, and, all good teams. And it's, what I want to see down the stretch, and I've seen MC once at the Penny Cup. Hopefully, things fall and I can get my eyes on them again. It's, is it going to be you're that 12th seed that nobody wants to play, or is it just not your year? I think there's a chance they could be that 12th seed nobody wants to play. Isabel Silva has been awesome in net. Couple of good young players on D and up front, in addition to the experienced players like an Evan Mustone and a Abby Poole. Right now things aren't going MC's way, but are they better than they've shown? Can they kind of be that thorn in your side down the stretch as a lower seed? We'll see.
And then a team that's going in a much different direction, Methuen Tewksbury, everything seems to be working for them. Yeah,
hey, still undefeated. High in the, I think they're number 2 in the, not even, they are 3 in the D1 power rankings. But I was so impressed by them, and I saw I think we talked about it last week in the game against Shawsheen, Bedford Lowell. You know, two really strong lines that can all contribute. Lila Chapman on D does a lot for that team, and we know what Lydia Barnes can do in net. Just the way they've been able to kind of smother teams has been really impressive this year.
And then, it's interesting, like we've talked about Archie's a little bit, but Bishop Feehan, they've been having some success lately.
Yeah, hey, we talked about them, a couple minutes ago, just hanging around here. They beat Archie's 3-0. They beat Bishop Fenwick 3-0. They beat Mansfield Oliver Ames Foxborough Co-op 3-0. Arlington Catholic 1-0. So I stand corrected. 4 straight shutouts, 4 via shut, to kind of bounce back from what was kind of a rough holiday season for them. It was a lot of loss, win, loss, win, loss. So, you're under 500 coming into the new year, and all of a sudden, hey, you're 6-5. And, can you get on a run here? We know the talent they have up front with a Georgia Murray and the like. In net, Aviva Olitsky's a great goalie. Again, kind of in that MC tier where, all right, your record's not jumping off the page. Can you either A, get on a run, or if, the inconsistency still lingers, we know your roster at least gives you the potential to be a big upset potential down the stretch in the, end of the regular season and into the postseason.
Who are some other teams that you kind of have your eye on right now?
Bishop Stang in particular. They reached the D1 final last year, I think, as the 15th seed. It was
That's right
in that neighborhood. I could be wrong, but it was one of those Cinderella runs, and I think they can make a deep run again. They're 8th or 9th, I should say, in the D1 power rankings. So obviously not as low of a seed as they were last year, but here they are. They've won, I think, 8 of their last 10, I think is the number. The one loss in there was a 1-goal loss to St. Mary's, who was very good this year. Emma Doucette, we talked about a lot last year about as a 6th grader. She's even better this year as a 7th grader, which is still crazy to say, talking about high school hockey, and you have a 7th grader lighting it up like this. But, you got wins over AC. Arlington Catholic on the girls' side, they're not 10-2 like they are on the boys' side, but they're very much, a team that can, give someone a good game on any given night and pull off an upset. That's kind of the book on them, at least so far this season, looking from afar. Archie's, better than they've shown, but, you beat them 1-0. Your only other blemishes on your record are a loss to Feehan and a tie with NDA. And again, Feehan's a better team than they've shown on their record, and NDA is obviously one of the better teams in D1 once again. So Bishop Stang's resume holds up. They've been playing games really tight, a bunch of 2-0, 1-0, like, that you got the shutouts there. Whether it's a Vivian Mello in net, and you get your timely scoring. So it feels like they could very easily make a deep run again.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see because it's January 20th as we record this, and we're in that stage where it's like we're just over a month from when the tournament brackets come out for the MIAA, and we're sitting there. Last year I remember writing a bracket. Like I think it's going to be a similar thing this year. And I think it's second straight week we do not have time for overtime, unfortunately. We're gonna have to do an episode, Pat, where we only just do overtime to make up for all the lost overtimes, but that's okay. We will have lots of stuff coming for you in the next week, month, years. We have a lot coming your way. Prep, MIAA, recruiting, all that great stuff. That's Patrick Donnelly. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We will see you at the rinks.